right, good afternoon, everybody. It's not in a great place to be standing between you and the Vegas evening, but look like we have a good crowd, a lot of people dedicated to learning more about Power Apps at this time. Thank you very much. So we'll start. I'm Raj Uthamanthil. I work at Seattle Children's Research Institute, also at the University of Washington as an affiliate faculty. My goal here is to kind of set the stage. Last meeting last year, I was part of a presentation on use of Power Apps. And this year we have a little more exciting stuff to share. But before that, Aaron and Karolien has more interesting things to share. But I want to just kind of refresh our memory where we were. So some of the slides that you see will be something that you saw in the past, but I'm going to give a quick overview. So about myself, I've been working in core facilities for about 20 years, starting I'm a lab animal veterinarian by profession, starting at MD Anderson Cancer Center, and then at Fred Hutch, ending up running as a big centralized shared research resources program that has decades of history as the leader of the program. And then last 5 years at Seattle Children's, except for the 2 years of COVID, I was focused on building a new centralized shared research resources program. It includes building new cores and bringing in departmental cores under a centralized system. You know how fun that is. So we are almost in a good place. So lots of good, great team members, new team members. So in that process, one of the things, the first part of the process was to really build that need, make it as part of the, get leadership buy-in, get faculty buy-in, make it part of the strategic plan. And we ended up actually making shared research resources as one of the 4 pillars of our scientific strategic plan, which was great, commitment. And all these key things that we talk about at a very high level, why centralized shared research resources or core facilities in general are important. So that's the first part. Great, you got your leadership convinced, you got commitment, you got faculty excited, and then comes the hard part, because you have to run it and then still need to go back and show what you've done and continue that support. And that's where we know this, I think it's more than almost 10 years now, with this great paper, Turpin et al. We have every kind of metrics that you want. It's listed, it's an amazing, a great paper. Ideally, we need all these metrics to show what we do. But what happens in general is we don't have all the tools. So we need data. We know it's there. We're not sure how to get it, all of that, the way we want it to present. And I asked my colleagues, many of you, and I know that a lot of you collect these data, some of them, you got your own tools, or institutions, we do different ways. Some institutions, many of us go by what's out there, right? iLab, StrataCore, Cores, or whatever software solutions that's available. They have limited capability. They're critical, but they don't give you all the things that you need. Then some go get their own IT group, build their own tools, kind of over time becomes a small, tiny IT company, right? Because you got this software. I've seen that in one of the institutions. You build this C++ or Java, and at some point in future, those languages are not used anymore. And then you have to have these unique people just held for making sure it doesn't break. And at some point, you have to completely reinvent it, and it becomes complicated. So the goal here for my brief presentation is to kind of introduce the Power App that we already all have. Somebody was asking me, what is that? Really, this is a function that your Microsoft Office, the enterprise version that you all have, it has it. It's available there. It's an easy tool to use. as long as you pay some attention. And my team, whatever we have done, a little bit of IT support, but then they were on their own, coming up with new ideas and building new apps. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background there. So I'm going to start. We started in our animal facility. A preclinical program is kind of complicated because not only our regular core facility requirements, on top of it there is a regulatory requirement, there is a intense operational requirement, health and safety. There's a lot going on there. So we started there, and really this was initially led by my training coordinator, who never knew anything about Power Apps until she started working on this. And I'm just going to go fast with some examples because my goal is to show you what's possible, some examples. So here is standard, how a sick animal is checked. You got these color-coded things that you put on the cage to communicate, and then a tech, takes it down, go to a computer, write down what happened. That has to be entered in an Excel file, send an email, connect to the vet and vet tech, and all those functions has to be done manually. And if it's maintaining rooms, there's a lot of logs that, sometimes they're digitized by scanning, but nobody goes into what's in there, or nobody get that data and look at that data and compare or analyze or anything. Let me see. Okay, so what we ended up is all our techs in the facility has an iPhone now. No more computer stations to walk into. As you can see, we have made 8 apps so far, and this is basically my team. The first app, there was some support from IT. Then I would say it might be a few hours of support overall from IT. After that, it's mostly done by people who doesn't know how to code, people who didn't know about PowerApp before. And this slide is to show that in the back end, it is a Microsoft SharePoint system. And you have the ability to connect any database that you have. They all talk to each other. So the good thing is, if you just, from a drop-down list in your app, in your phone, you pick a name of a PI, a lot of those things, the protocols and a lot of the things are all comes as drop-down lists. The chance of error is so low. Your need to type in anything is really low. And all this data is connected, and you have the ability to pull connections and whatever analysis in the end with the data that you have. This is another example of another app where we call the service request, technical service request, where all our users, the researchers also have this app in their phone. So if they have to now, they used to have a Word file, they have to send it to somewhere, then somebody looks at it, reviews it, assign to someone, a tech to do the service. Now they do it on their Power App in their phone, and then it goes straight to the team. It goes to the tech in the room. They do it immediately. They enter it like a drop-down list, and it's done, and it gets charged for whatever the time. So it's like such a streamlined, a huge difference. So here is a kind of a quick overview. The ability to use at the point of use. You have to be in the animal room, or you're a core facility, wherever you are, you have it in your phone. You get to use it right there. It's a live data capture. Time, there's no delay in going somewhere, entering something, opening a file, nothing like that. User interface is customizable, which is a big thing, especially when we consider the existing ready-made software that we use, which we have to kind of align to what's possible within that system. And the SharePoint list, I mentioned lots of automation and the collated data. So there's there's multiple advantages with the system. And I'm going to show you one more example. Again, as I said, my goal is to kind of show you what's possible with it so that you all can think about it, and maybe hopefully we can all share what's possible and kind of crowdsource this thing, potentially. So here, what we did is, as a shared resources, we went beyond our typical definition of looking at the core facilities, right? It's our equipment being shared by everybody. We reached out to our faculty and said, our key value is sharing. So we are going to help you to share the equipment that you have with others so that everybody doesn't need to buy a seahorse in their labs or whatever that is that they have. Are you ready to share? So we send this link to everybody. They all get to take a picture of the equipment they're ready to share, the location, the contact number, all that information here. And so that anyone who wants to look for this equipment can go into the catalog and look for it, and they will see where that is. And now we have a plan to enhance this by adding QR code on all these shared equipment in the lab. And this is getting more exciting, well, I wouldn't say exciting, more important now, especially when you have, if the funding is more limited, right? You don't want 20, even the PCR machines in the same floor or whatever. Every faculty doesn't need to have, even if it's a $20,000 equipment, there is an opportunity here for you to kind of reduce cost, reduce use of space. So we are providing a tool to do that. And there are, I'm not going to go into the details of this. Absolutely, it's not just about data collection. It's not about ease of, access. It's also about reducing lots of these operational, improving the efficiencies. So that we have some data there to show. And of course, I mentioned to you the value of visualizing data. For example, in my animal facility, if a PI with a large animal colony, I look at this data every month, and I can see spikes, and I can know, oh, there's something. Either there's a new tech or postdoc in the room, or somebody is on vacation, because I can see incidents going up. All kinds of incidents are now entered in here because it's very easy for our techs to do that. So it's great to capture things that you otherwise will miss until something really goes wrong, right? So with that, I got a couple more things. I thought I'll ask ChatGPT to kind of convince people that it's not too hard, right? I asked ChatGPT, what can you do to help to build Power Apps? And probably Karolien can give you more examples of how someone who doesn't have an understanding of what this is kind of building these things with the AI. So really, there's a lot of help out there that you can do self-help using AI models. And lastly, I want to leave you with this. So last year when I presented, somebody in the audience said, we need a WhatsApp group now. And I was not sure, I was not prepared, but right after the meeting, I started one. So we had almost 100 people join. And I think the expectation, probably didn't make clear. I think the expectation was that someone is going to share apps made and whatever. I don't know what the expectation was, but it's very quiet. And so right now I see 36 members in there. So my assumption is, half of the people left it because nothing was happening. The other half, either they are super optimistic that something will happen even after a year of nothing, or they don't know they're there still. Either way, what I thought is, if the goal for this group is to have a forum for all of us, if you're interested, to kind of exchange ideas on what kind of apps can work, what tips for building it. If you are struggling with something, questions, maybe ask. So if you're interested with that expectation, otherwise I'm going to ask, maybe send a message to everybody, hey, can I close this group? But if you can join, and maybe it's a place where we can have some conversations. Now, Aaron has something exciting because, well, I don't want to take your thunder, but anyway, he has managed to interface PowerApp with iLab, which is super exciting because we can do a lot more now with it.
Thank you, Raj. Wow, 3 chandeliers. I don't know if I've ever had the opportunity to present in a room so large, but really thankful for this opportunity. And I say that in part because part of my presentation was designed to have some details that might be difficult for those in the back to see, but I'll do what I can to explain and walk through it. But yeah, really grateful for this opportunity, and I think I was actually just recently in a session about creativity in cores, and when I was in that session, I kind of was thinking about what I'm going to talk about today, and this is really kind of an extension of how to be creative working in a core facility within the context of iLab and PowerApps, because I imagine for many of us here in the room, we all kind of have that common ground, whether we use iLab, StrataCore, Cores, or some other platform to receive, that intake process for each request and have some sort of mechanism to understand and develop a scope of the project, and then ultimately to bill it out at the end of each month, or however frequently you choose to do so. So what I'm going to talk about today is kind of really building that bridge to extract data from iLab in a seamless flow, and then to kind of expand upon that in terms of, one, creating a user experience that, and I'm going to give the experience of a histology core, but to kind of help improve the user experience of working with the core, but internally within the core to help our staff kind of manage the different requests that they have, and then for me to kind of get an operational sense of workload, turnaround time, forecasting, all those kind of different metrics that I think are going to be helpful as the core evolves and moves forward. So here's just a quick overview of what I'll be going into, but really just kind of centralizing on that common theme about using iLab data in a way that for me is pretty novel, but in a way that I think could be applicable to cores, not just histology, but around the spectrum of what research entails in a core facility setting. So just a quick talk about myself. This is actually the second time I've given a talk at ABRF. The first one was this morning. So I'm the Director of Operations for Shared Research Resources at Seattle Children's Research Institute. I said earlier, this is a relatively new program in the grand scheme of things. We're only a few years old. The top 2 cores there actually went live just a month ago. But we've had a range of different cores. Our flow core was previously decentralized. We started the Genomics and Spatial Biology collab and Microscopy and Histopathology collabs from scratch. I'll be focusing on the histopathology part of that lab in my talk today. We also have preclinical imaging. But really, I've been working with iLab for a number of years. I started at OHSU in 2016, and I think started really getting involved with iLab a year after that. So I've historically been the guy who can, wind up a core from scratch, develop all the different settings in a schedule or a request. So I was kind of the go-to resource for all things iLab. So I take with me that kind of background, but I'm hoping I can share some insights for to whatever extent you use iLab or StrataCore, that we can learn and expand upon it. The goal here today really is to focus on the histology core in my program and expand upon the data that we can get from iLab in a way that I think is novel and will be helpful. That, like as I said, is kind of the dual approach of providing a means for users to benefit for how they interact with the core in terms of getting that really important status update for their request. In histology, there's a pretty wide range of projects and slide numbers, sample numbers that we deal with. So it's really important for us to provide a mechanism for them to see exactly where their request is, as opposed to literally knocking on the door, writing an email. Some ways that are maybe not the best or most efficient way to learn about where their request is, and then hopefully end on like a vision of how we can move forward with this using whether it's machine learning or AI tools to develop this further. So our histology core historically was decentralized, and what I mean by that, it had been operated within the Cancer Center at our research institute, but we also work very closely with Fred Hutch and other local resources. So our user base for histology had been used to this in-house resource where it was specifically tailored to their needs in the Cancer Center, or they would outsource it. So the challenge that we were met with was, after we had kind of worked with the Cancer Center to transfer their equipment to the Shared Research Resources program, to really set the expectation for what we can do, because there was a very high standard in terms of what the Cancer Center in particular was expecting of us to provide a reliable quality service in a way that will continue to help us grow the core internally, reduce the rate at which our histology needs are outsourced, et cetera. So this is kind of the approach that I was taking to develop this further. So the problem statement that I kind of approach this with is, it's a common challenge, and I imagine many in the room here can relate to this, is that communications are a challenge in cores. It's never a problem that I think will be solved, There's always different ways that we can improve upon how we can interact with our cores and provide them with what they need. From my perspective, whether I'm writing a report on core utilization data or where I'm preparing for an advisory committee meeting, I kind of at different iterations will create my own dashboards and charts and analyze the data, but it's not really real time. It's usually at specific time points throughout the year that I do this, so it'd be really helpful to see exactly like week to week, day to day, what things look like in the core. Again, deriving this information originally at least from iLab. And yeah, our users, they need very accurate turnaround time information for the requests that they've already submitted, but also to kind of get a sense for when they want to think about their next project, what they can expect from the core in terms of receiving their samples back and moving forward. So the opportunity that we have, my institute, all the cores that I showed in the previous slide, they all use iLab. We have a number of other cores that use iLab. We have about 20 different cores that have small core facility, medium core facility. But what iLab is limited in some ways is that detailed project management that you need. You have your basic steps of like begin work, in process, complete. But it doesn't really get into the details of where exactly a request is in terms of specific numbers of specimens that have been processed, stained, cover slipped, you name it. It doesn't really get into that in a way that I think is helpful for our users. So what I'm hoping to do is leverage PowerApps to increase that visibility in a way that's easily accessible for our users to kind of decrease their anxiety about where their requests might be if we have a huge influx of requests that we're trying to work through. And then for me, help make decisions on real data that's at my fingertips. But the risk here, and something that I think is still always a challenge, is this effort in terms of using the Power App. I really want to make sure that there's a demonstrated value add to this, because it does take, at least for me, some time to do this. We're all very busy. And I want to make sure that this is a system that doesn't just duplicate in some ways what iLab already does or what other tools are out there that we're already using. So this has to be a unique experience for our users to get value from, and for myself as well. So this is one of the slides where I apologize for people in the back. But for those of you who are familiar with iLab, is you can curate these different request forms where, and what's shown here to the left is what I refer to as like our consolidated histology and IHC request form, where there's that conditional logic based on how the user wants to request services from the core. They enter their information, new fields appear based on the nature of the responses that are inputted. And what our core needs to do then is they have to go into iLab. It's not really a mobile-friendly software. They must log in. They have to go away from the lab and see the request each time. They can print it out if they want to, but again, that's maybe not the best approach for working through your work that you have ahead of you. And then once a user puts their information in, it usually doesn't change after the fact. So any changes to the scope of the project has to kind of be communicated further out. But what we can do is, for many of you who, like me, who use iLab, I report out on it all the time. You can report out on these custom forms as well, not just charges and requests and equipment schedules, stuff like that. So this part is really key. This is kind of where I've pointed the API, the Power Automate feature that I'll get into in a couple slides, to look at this report, extract this data from the form that's specific to the request that was inputted. Excuse me. And then we use this data to at least start with, and then we go forward. So, taking a step back, like I said, the iLab is great in many ways, especially for billing. That's ultimately what I need it for, but it doesn't really, in a context of a histology core, reveal the exact extent to which a request has been completed in terms of tissue processing, embedding, sectioning, staining, all the services that we provide. It doesn't always get into that, especially in real time, for what a core can do. And like I mentioned a moment ago, it's not very responsive, meaning that it doesn't really appear well if you're trying to browse on your phone. And that's something that our users they're in the lab, they're away from their workstations, they're not always wanting to go back and forth in terms of how they can interact with us and see where their request is at. So for us, one thing that was really made clear to me from the Cancer Center was that the turnaround time in particular for their requests, not only for the requests that they submit, but also knowing in advance what they can expect, that was really key for reducing the rate at which they might go somewhere else for their histology needs, but then kind of work with us to get their request in. So one thing that I learned in grad school, I took a little bit of time learning about queue management and how you can allocate different resources to reduce queues. I put a picture here because I hope many people like me can relate to waiting in a long line in Disneyland for a ride that's exciting. And you can imagine, like, so there's two people. One person knows that it'll take 70 minutes to get on the ride. One person does not know that. And ultimately, if it does take 70 minutes, the person who already knows that it'll take 70 minutes will have a much better experience in terms of reducing their anxiety and their frustration with the experience, as long as they at least know with some measure of accuracy what they can expect in terms of their wait time. So that's something that I'm trying to manage in this framework, as to reduce that frustration with the core in a way that we're kind of limited in terms of our staffing and capacity to what our turnaround times look like. But if we can actually accurately portray that, then at least that's a really positive step forward. So yeah, just to get started, and again, I'm going to frame this from the iLab perspective. I imagine it's a relatively similar process working with Straticore or other platforms. Is we had our service automation. These are people that kind of on the business development side kind of helped me with this. Is I had to assign them as a core admin so they can get access to that reporting data on the custom forms. And then that means they have to register themselves for an iLab account and go through these different processes to make sure they get set up. And then once they were given kind of access to the core, then that's where we can really get our feet wet in terms of getting the Power Apps and Power Automate integrated. So what this looked like is we created a Power Automate flow that's pictured here. Again, apologies for people in the back. That calls the iLab API to get that custom form data. We do this on a daily basis. You could change the rate at which you do it, but daily is something that I think is workable enough for us. And then what this does is it just pulls that data from the custom form via the API, and initially it lands in the SharePoint list. So what you're seeing here is exactly 100% mirrors what is in iLab. It's everything, all the nitty-gritty details of the different requests and the forms that we extract from it. So this is different. It's just the raw data formatted, but this is a really key point then where we can integrate that Power App. So what we can do with that then, I've redacted some of the names here, but we can then play with that data that we got from the custom form and then customize the Power App to different rates. We want our core staff to see really important parts of that custom form. How many samples were submitted, who's the contact name. You can customize that variably, but the way that we approach this is we wanted to create some check marks for what the core can then input, and that's kind of what's shown here for the rate at which tissue processing has been completed, embedding has been completed, and again, this is reactive to the conditional logic in the form where it'll only show paraffin as an option for embedding if they selected that in the iLab form that was kind of at the beginning. So what this then does is gives us the opportunity to create, we can create a progress bar. That's the blue and orange line there. So our core can see to the extent to which their request has been processed, but more importantly, the user can also access this app on their phone. And of course, we filter it and restrict it so they only see their own requests. We don't want to see expose the data for everything, but they can go in and see exactly where their request is in terms of you can do a percentage. Right now we've done it a fraction because again each request is going to be variable into different scope and sizes, but this is kind of a common way that we can present this. And then we can also take it further and give our staff an option to upload a picture, confirming tissue orientation. This is the basic cartoon, but our users can also upload pictures themselves about how exactly they want something to look for their slides, you name it. And this is just another quick view. So I think this is key to another thing that was communicated to me, like how can we make this visible on our phone? This is basically the exact same thing that I showed in the previous slide, but in a mobile-friendly format. And then, we then can kind of take it a next step further on the phone where we can have push notifications. We can also email, trigger emails for specific workflow steps that have been completed. Our users have different preferences for how they want to be contacted and receive these updates. So we have a pretty wide range of ability in PowerApps to customize how we want to do that. So yeah, just kind of taking another step back is what's the core, I guess I already mentioned they can upload a picture, confirm tissue orientation, look at see if there's any bubbles present after cover slipping before it can go to slide scanning. That was an issue that we recently encountered, so hopefully this is something that can kind of get ahead of that to make sure that the core's work is at a quality level that the request can proceed then to other services. But what I'd really like to take next, and this is something that I'm hoping that we can do in the coming weeks and months ahead, is really kind of develop a model to get some forecasting done that's very unique to the nature of the request, whether it's based on the specimen type, different processing steps that are involved in the request, any kind of special stains or multiplex IEC. For me, getting a sense of the workload and staffing levels that are in the core, because again, if many of you know, you can assign a staff member to a different type of service request, but it's also something that you can do directly in the PowerApp, assign a staff member, and then take a look broadly at our equipment availability and its usage. So this is some just examples that I've thrown out there. Again, hopefully it's easy to see for those in the back. Of what you can see, the bars there are really just the different core staff that we have, so you can get a sense for which staff are assigned to which tasks, to percent of which each task has been completed. Get some really good information for me to see kind of how requests are being completed on time. How does that match up to the different forecasts that are out there? How do we see the rate at which staff are completing their requests based on how many requests are assigned to them? So this is just an example. Core staff 1 has a relatively modest amount of requests on their plate, but their productivity is relatively low. So that can give me an opportunity to then kind of ask questions why. And this is something that I'm really excited to do going forward, is kind of going down into the details of the specific nature of the request, and then model out a trend for the size of the request, how long it takes, and then use this to map out what we can expect from the core. Watch this over time. How does it change? And see to the extent to which we might need to add new staff, or what issues might be presented in the core's operations. That, again, I mentioned those high expectations that we have for the Cancer Center. How can we use this information to make sure that we're meeting those expectations? There's still, this isn't complete, I would say. There's still some issues to iron out. There's a wide variety of requests that maybe our initial request form doesn't capture in a way that can easily be integrated into the PowerApp. I give an example here of how do we build that checklist that I mentioned when users ask for more than one antibody that isn't multiplex. This would, you need a checkbox for each antibody in the progress checklist, so that's something that we still need to work out. And testing does make time. We have to make sure that this is something that our users, as variable as they are, they have their different needs, their different pain points, that this is something that at least can, across the board, meet most of their needs. And everyone has different opinions and preferences for how they want to receive notifications. Their phones are, in most cases, a personal device. Do they want to receive, work-related notifications on that? So that's something that, is some important consideration to take in. But then, how do we really kind of make this less burdensome, use Copilot and other generative AI to ease the burden both on our staff and our users for how they interact with the system, and then see if we can move data back from the PowerApp into iLab to see if we can streamline the process of marking a request as complete, getting it ready for billing. So that's something that I think would be interesting to tease out. Last real content slide here. So what we've accomplished is we have transparency across the system in terms of where a request is, how did it kind of get there, and what we can do to see where each different requests are in our histology core, but hopefully also in other cores. From my perspective, I have a really great tool to get all the operational data that originates from iLab. It's customizable, and then it also addresses our users' needs in real time, hopefully in a way that's user-friendly and gives them those key updates that they want. So yeah, next steps, I want to see how we can apply this to other cores, and then see how we can build out more ML and AI tools that aren't already built into it. Yep, and acknowledgements, thanks for the SRR team, but also my business application team, Jihong and Michael. They've been really critical to help get this off the ground, and they've been a really great resource, so thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for sticking around. The last talk of the day. My name is Karolien Denef. I am the director of the Analytical Resources Core at Colorado State University. We're a centralized core, so we sit under the vice president for research. And my core provides services in NMR, mass spectrometry, electron microscopy, X-ray diffraction, bulk materials and material surface characterization, proteomics, and metabolomics. So it's a large core facility. We have, on average, around 600 users in a given year. We have over 30 pieces of equipment and a staff group of about 14 staff scientists. And I'm here today to talk about a number of tools. Kind of, PowerApps is one of it, but I'm also going to talk a little bit about a chatbot that we developed and how we use AI to create some smarter workflows, create efficiencies. And this is just kind of an example of how we've implemented these tools in my core. I hope I can inspire you to maybe think about how you can leverage these techniques in your own core facilities, or maybe they're not useful at all, but that's okay too. So I'm just sharing a story. And my talk's going to be pretty practical. I just want to run through a couple examples of how we develop these tools, very basic. I was actually one of the people in Raj's session last year and was thinking by myself, oh, I've never heard of PowerApps. Maybe this is something that I can use in my facility. Didn't know anything about it, but I don't like using a tool just for the sake of a new tool. I really wanted to identify a couple real problems that we were faced with and that maybe we can benefit from creating some efficiencies by using some of these AI-powered tools. So that's kind of what I have in mind to tell you about today. So two different parts of this talk, and I'm just going to start out with picturing the problem that I identified that I wanted to maybe look into creating some efficiency. So on the one hand, I have a full-time business manager. Her name is Kathy Griffin, and she is in charge of all our finances, our budgeting, our rate setting, but she's also kind of my iLab person. At CSU, we do not have centralized iLab support. We have a central person who handles the licensing and the payment for the license for all the cores. We have a number of cores who use iLab, but I don't have a person who can answer all the questions. And as you all know, there's a lot of people who bombard you with questions around iLab. At least that's the case for my core. And because we were kind of the first ones to implement iLab years ago in my core, we just kind of became that resource for everybody. So anytime there's a question from a user or a PI or a fiscal officer, they seem to come to us for answers. So Kathy gets bombarded with questions every week. She gets the same questions over and over. And so initially we thought, well, let's just build some SOPs, maybe some Q&As that we can put on the website, but nobody reads them. So she just keeps repeating her same answers. She's got some email templates, but it's taking up a lot of her time. So my question was, okay, is there something we can do to reduce her burden in terms of answering these questions? And the same for my staff. It's not just my business manager. So I looked into a chatbot, and this was inspired by a talk, I think last year, or maybe the year before at ABRF. Someone gave a talk about using a chatbot for answering questions in their microscopy core, which was a self-use facility where people use instruments. They have access 24/7 and sometimes need a quick questions about something that's pretty quick to troubleshoot themselves. And so they created a chatbot. And I was like, that would be kind of cool. Maybe I should look into that. And so this last year, I kind of looked into developing that for some automation around our iLab Q&A. And I'll go into that in just a minute. On the other hand, I looked into Power Apps specifically for something very basic. We don't do so well around our inventory management. And in terms of inventory, I mean inventory around instruments and the associated IT. What I've come to experience this past year is we've been kind of moving to a more self-insured model in our core facility where we have less and less service contracts, especially in mass spectrometry. We hired a service engineer who's kind of in charge of doing all the troubleshooting, preventative maintenance. He steps in when there's an issue with an instrument, and he's kind of expanding because he's so experienced in other areas of the facility. But we needed a better way to have him look through our instrument inventory. When an instrument goes down, he needs to be immediately notified so that he can quickly communicate with the instrument manager. And that was just all happening in Excel and in hidden lists that nobody knew how to access. And they're just very static. They're not very dynamic, and they didn't really notify him very quickly. He has to go to multiple locations on campus, and there just needed to be a way to communicate more efficiently. And then we also are working at CSU. There's some more stringent requirements around our IT. We actually have to now abide by some of the new cybersecurity rules, which means that all of our networked computers have to have the latest operating systems by October 2025. And as you all know, you probably work with equipment that still has Windows XP maybe, or an old Windows system on it that is not so easy to upgrade. So we are doing a full assessment of our IT inventory that also lives in a hidden Excel file that everybody was updating from different angles. And we needed to have a way to kind of work with our central IT to go through that list and say, okay, which systems need to be upgraded, which ones can be upgraded, how much will it cost? So inventory management was just becoming a little bit of a problem, and I decided I want to move away from Excel and look for a tool that can help us do that in a more dynamic, collaborative way. So I looked at Power Apps for that. So going back to the chatbot. So why a chatbot? Well, they're easy to access. They just pop up on a website, and they're 24/7 available. You get an instant response. They're always there. And usually the answers are pretty consistent. They're also scalable, so if you want to expand it, you start maybe with something around iLab, you can keep feeding it information to give better answers. So that seemed to be a nice way to provide answers faster and more consistent than we've been doing it now. I used a software called VoiceFlow. This was because in that last year's talk at ABRF, which is what I love about ABRF, you learn a lot during these conferences, that was the software that they used. It's free and accessible, so for me, I wasn't quite sure, I don't know if this is gonna work or not, but let me give it a try, and I preferred to not pay for it. And I also prefer to use something that doesn't require a ton of coding, because I didn't have the time to really spend a ton of my time on developing this myself. It's very easy to use. You don't need to be a programmer. I had no experience with it, and it was actually quite doable. Community trusted was recommended at ABRF, so I thought if it worked for someone here, then maybe it's something I could develop myself. And it's very flexible. You can constantly refine it. You can keep updating it with new information. So you see here on the left, it's a little prototype that I developed for these iLab questions. It basically just it greets you, asks you a question, what do you need help with? Someone asks, how do I cancel a reservation? And it pops out a response, and it's always very structured and step-by-step some guidance on how to do that. So how do we build that? I started out with building a knowledge base. VoiceFlow uses knowledge bases, which is kind of a repository of information that you develop yourself and that you allow the AI tool or agent to grab answers out of. So I structured that. Right now I have 4 files in there that are basically Q&As, so they're questions and answers around all the things that we encounter people asking us questions about with iLab. So I talked to my staff, I asked my business manager what are some of the typical recurring questions that always come up. We have SOPs and Q&A already developed, so I pulled from that. And then I also used the iLab help site. They actually have quite a lot of good Q&A in there, but it's very general, and it wasn't so specific for my core, and we all do things very differently. So I kind of structured that in a number of themes, because I noticed that the AI agent does better when you group all those Q&As by topic. It finds answers a lot easier. Then we built the flows, and in VoiceFlow, it's really just kind of a click and drop system. So you grab an action button, you drop it into a dashboard, and then you connect it with arrows. Super simple. I didn't know anything about this, so I actually used ChatGPT anytime I needed a suggestion on how to build this flow. VoiceFlow had a lot of help sites, but they were very lengthy in text, and I just decided to type in my question in ChatGPT, and I always got an amazing answer, and I was able to move forward with it. So it didn't take me that much time. I also decided to look for a way to capture all the unanswered questions that the chatbot couldn't answer and move those into a Google Sheet, and I did that through a little API using a program called Zapier. I didn't come up with that myself. I asked it in ChatGPT again, and I said, how do I do this? So it gave me some suggestions, and I implemented it, and it worked just fine. So now I have a Google Sheet that records all the questions that my chatbot cannot answer, and I can keep refining it. So this last phase that we've been working on is just to test it, improve it based on feedback, and then you can publish it on your website. I have been testing it out with a prototype. I have not used it yet as a pop-up on my website, just because I ran into some accessibility issues that CSU's IT pushed back on, and I need to improve that. It's all possible, but I wasn't aware that our accessibility rules became a little bit stricter this year, so I have to address that. So this is kind of how the dashboard looks. I'm sorry if it's a little bit small for the people in the back, but basically it just starts out with a greeting. You can do all kinds of fun stuff, like say hello in a different language. Then it asks you the question, hey, how can I help you? You can use AI to have 5 or 6 or 8 different variants of that question, so you can play around a little bit with making it more creative. Then the user gives a question, and then it basically runs a query through your knowledge base, which documents all your information that you gave it, and it will spit out an answer. If the user is happy with it, you have an ending that says, I'm glad I was able to help you out. If it doesn't help, then basically you can ask for further clarification. Again, you can do that through a number of questions that you can ask AI to form for you. Then it uses basically the initial input as well as the clarification and looks back in the knowledge base, tries to give you another answer. If it doesn't find an answer, then it goes through an API to put those questions in a Google Sheet, and it tells you, I'm sorry, I really can't help you with this. Please contact our business manager to a general email address. So you still have the human support if you need it. So anyway, that's kind of how it looks like. It's pretty simple, but so far it's been answering most of the kind of recurring basic questions that are not too advanced. Sometimes we do get questions that the chatbot just can't answer, and then our business manager helps out. A couple words of caution. It is a third-party software, so those things change. In fact, before I made this presentation, I actually went on to the VoiceFlow website, and they said, oh, we're going to make some changes April 15. Make sure that you adopt your workflow. And there were some functionalities that were going to disappear, so I had to spend some time correcting those. So that can always happen. I don't have control over that. I mentioned about the accessibility law, so it's always good to check with your institution what you have to make sure you implement so that people with disabilities can use the chatbot. They're very strict about it at our university. And sometimes you lose some personal assistance. Some people hate chatbots. I do actually not like them for certain things. But it is there, and if people need an urgent question answered, then it can be useful. And then the second part is a little bit more about PowerApps. I want to walk you through what we've done. It's very basic. It's a simple start. I haven't spent as much time on the PowerApps as Raj and Aaron has done so far, but it's a start, and it has been so far pretty helpful. So like I said, we really needed a tracking platform that's easy to access, that's collaborative, that can be visual, and that helps me as a core director get a little bit more oversight than to screen through an Excel with all the instruments to see, okay, what's online, what's maybe down, where are we with our compliance, meeting compliance around our IT. And I wanted something that could send notifications. So tried PowerApps. So this is kind of how it looks like for my core. On the top, there's a little dashboard that shows me a quick visual on instruments online, instruments offline, which ones are being decommissioned, which ones are coming online soon, what's our status around our IT compliance, which systems are out of compliance, which ones are met the compliance rules from our university. It's an app on a phone, so anybody can access it. In our case, we have it password protected, so only certain people with a login and a password can access the app. The nice thing about it is it's a Microsoft tool, so you can find it in your little menu button in SharePoint. It integrates with a lot of Microsoft tools like Power Automate, SharePoint, Lists, Excel. So that makes it very, you can sync everything together. If you make a change in a Power App, it will change it in the list and vice versa. You have on-the-go access. It's on your phone. That made it very attractive to me for someone like a service engineer who's walking to an instrument, fixes it, brings it back online, he can change the status. Or for an instrument manager who has an issue on their instrument, he can just go in the app and make the change, and then the service engineer gets notified. It's very collaborative because of that, provides real-time updates, and it is very easy to develop, even by non-experts. So it was a little intimidating in the beginning, but again, AI actually helped with building this tool very quickly. So how does it work? So in the app, we basically just have two buttons in the button or in the app. One is for computers and one is for instruments. You just click on one, but you can add as many as you want. We've been thinking about adding one for onboarding, for user training, but this is just a start. Then it opens the whole inventory of our instruments. You can add a new one, you can edit a field, you can delete one, so you can put any information about that instrument in the app. Everything is actually in a SharePoint list with as much information as you want on your instruments, but you can pick in the app whatever you want to see visualized. You can locate a feature through you can locate a record through any sort feature or any filter feature. That's all something you can build in. And if you edit a field, in our case, because of how we structured it, it can send a notification to a person. I didn't do this myself. I actually worked with a student hourly, believe it or not. He's in the picture here. His name is Jake Newman. And he's a student hourly who has been working with us for a couple of months around finance and admin, so he helps us with some basic finance tasks. And I asked him, hey, do you want to help me with this? And he's like, sure, I'll look into it. He didn't know anything about PowerApps, so this could be one way for you to try this out, is just give it to a student. We started with Excel lists, put them into SharePoint lists, one for computers, one was for instruments. And then we created the Power App from the SharePoint list. We used a lot of AI, ChatGPT for guidance. We used Power Automate for real-time email notifications. That's what Power Automate is really good at. And then we created a dashboard for the visual summary of the key metrics. How does it look like when you build a Power App? So you open the Power Apps tool in Microsoft SharePoint. Then you are asked to choose a format. You can choose from anything. In our case, it was just a table and a form, but there's all kinds of options to visualize these things. Then it asks you what data to use, so you connect it to your list. And then it uploads everything in that app by just connecting it, and then you can play with the fields in terms of what you want to visualize. The Power Automate flow, so in our case, there's a trigger. Let's say an instrument manager says, well, this system goes offline. They edit it on the app. The app then uses that trigger to go back to SharePoint, update the list, and then the Power Automate flow basically creates a variable that it then puts into an email so that the notification gets sent to the user. So the flow is basically when an item gets modified, get the items that have changed, build a variable, decide what you want to grab out of that variable, and put that in the email to notify. In this case, service engineer will be notified which instruments have gone offline. That person can then communicate with the staff, or an IT person or myself gets information about IT updates. At least that's how we use it. In terms of the dashboard, that's very simple to do as well. You just create a new screen. You click on Insert. You can choose all kinds of things. In our case, it was a pie chart. You have to give it some code to tell it what you want to put in the pie charts. That was a little trickier, but again, ChatGPT helped us with that. And then the result is a visual that you can decide whatever you want to see. In our case, it's just the status of instruments and computers. A little bit about role of AI. Like I said, AI can be used in the chatbot to generate answers. There's all kinds of settings that you can play with around how creative you want the answer to be, how long you want the answer to be, or how short you want it to be. So that's something that it guides you through. You can choose the AI model. In this case, we just used GPT Turbo. It was free, so I just decided to start with that, and it worked pretty well. We use it a lot for learning. Anytime we didn't know how to do something, I just plugged it in there and it gave an answer. And you can even take screenshots of error messages, paste a screenshot in ChatGPT, and actually comes up with an answer, so it's pretty powerful. So in summary, I would say AI chatbots can be really useful for boosting efficiency. I've yet to see if it's going to be really taking off with our customers, but I'm hoping to give it a try. And it wasn't that much effort to build, so if it doesn't work well, then we'll just not use it anymore. Voice flow is very easy to learn without any coding experience, but do realize that there are some risks because it's a third-party software. Anything can change. I like PowerApps. It provides real-time updates, and it's easy to give accessibility to a lot of people because it's on your phone, and that can be very helpful for certain people who are moving between buildings and between instruments. And again, it's all doable by non-experts, so none of us had experience with this, and it was not a big time sink to just try it out. So if you're interested in trying it out, you can build it yourself with very little time and very little coding experience. So that's my talk. I will be happy to take some questions. I also put a different QR code there because Raj and Aaron and I were talking about if there is an interest in learning how to do this yourself and want to get some training, or in a session like this, there's only so much we can show. You can put your name and your email address there, and maybe we'll come up with a little hands-on training session if that would be of interest to this group. Thank you.
It's working. So, okay, we are ready for any questions?
Hi, I'm Blaise Robin from Memory Larson Catering. I relate 100% to all you have described so far. The fact that it's too static, need more dynamic stuff. So my team and I are trying to develop exactly what you're doing. So using PowerApps or Power Automate. I'm not that far for now. More like doing automated emails. It started to work pretty well. And I'm trying exactly what Aaron was describing, trying to connect to iLabs through an API. My question was more do you have any caveats? Are you running into glitch with Power Automate? Do you see, especially with the API connectivity, something is it working well, or are you running into problems, an issue? And what would you recommend to someone like me just starting doing this?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think generally speaking, it is working well. When we first started getting the API kinks worked out, there were some failed connections, but the daily sync that we have seems to be pretty stable. I do want to emphasize, my expectation is that I'll need to continually test it, not only for the user's perspective, but from my own to see if there's any tweaks that need to be made. Not only for the API connection, but also how we use the Power App itself. But I have to thank Jihong, who is our business development guy. He was really key in kind of getting that connection established and showing me, I don't know if you have someone else that can support you, like a analyst or something like that, but having that kind of relationship where I met with him every other week, that was really helpful too. And they do this type of thing on the side of the hospital side for us, but I think having that partner was really helpful.
Yeah, sure. I have actually someone who knows how to code, and I think it's also helpful, even if it's low code, someone who really knows what's happening behind the scenes is very important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, for me, I feel like I have very limited time to do a project like this, but the value and the need was there, so having someone else that can leverage their time as well was really helpful for me in doing this.
Okay, thank you.
My question is for Karolien. How secure is voice flow? If, let's say, any chatbot, you could basically look at your policies, procedures, or SOPs and link it and have it answer questions, right? But being a third-party software, how secure is the data that it won't get out of your local institution if you were to expand its use?
Is that on? Okay. That's a good question, actually. Like I said, I've been working with my IT group who's been raising it to a central level to make sure that right now they're mostly concerned about accessibility, but I haven't heard them mention anything about their worry about security. But that's something I'll definitely bring up, but I don't really know.
Yeah, because even for ChatGPT, right, we have to go through the Microsoft enterprise, not the actual ChatGPT, because the data gets out.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I wasn't sure if you ran into it, so.
No, not yet.
Okay.
Hello, Zbigniew Mikulski, Lahore Institute. Great stuff. You, my dear, need to fix access for that QR code. And that leads me to that kind of question that bounces off this one about, like, you know, we're going to be building more and more and more of those tools, right? And at some point in time, people will retire. How are you envisioning curating them, moving them into the future, adapting those different services that link things together? And my final question is, how much time did it take you to develop them, and how much time you think it's going to occupy you or your team to keep them up to date and keep them working? Thank you.
Are you talking about the Power App mostly? Yeah. I would say the time it took to develop was probably, I mean, Jake started working with me not so long ago, but I think he spent maybe 2 days on it. Yeah, so it wasn't that long. And, you know, he's a student, so that doesn't mean a full day. He did have some kinks to work out, and it was very much a back and forth. You know, I kept asking, oh, can I do this? Can I do that? Can you try to do this? So as much as we could have started much more basic, he just kept adding to it because I was interested in seeing what it was able to do. But anytime we added a new functionality, he was able to do it within a few hours, yeah. And keeping it up to date, I have noticed maybe one disadvantage of it is if you make structural changes to the SharePoint list, the Power App doesn't automatically update it. I'm not sure if that's the same for you. It's only when it updates content. And so anytime there is if, you know, our IT group was like, oh, we want to add a column or another couple columns around some things that they wanted to keep informed about, the app didn't update it automatically, so we had to kind of reload it manually. But that's something that I've noticed that might be a little bit of a disadvantage, but that's just structural changes, yeah.
I would agree with that. The challenges we had from a maintenance perspective was that any changes in database, email lists, or something changes, then you have to go fix it. That was the only challenge that we had.
But these things evolve so quickly. I mean, I feel like in Microsoft, there's like what it was able to do last year, it's already so much more advanced now. So keeping up to date with some of those new functionalities, I think, is just how it's evolving right now, yeah.
Thank you all for organizing this session, because we are also trying to get this organized, and learning from you guys is already really great. I had a question for Aaron. We have Stratacore, so PPMS platform, and you were talking about the API link that PIs will have access if they have an admin account. Do they then also have access to all the invoicing and all the other groups and access within the system? Or is it possible to have an admin account and then access to the API link without having all these options as an admin?
That was a limitation, I think, that the way that we approached this, and my partner in the business development side They really needed to get to understand how to work with iLab and understand what iLab is, and then connect it to PowerApp. They needed that account established in iLab. That was the only way for them to get the service account set up to enable the API. But if I had more time to do it myself, I would have just used my own, so it's not critically needed. But for me in my practice, it was the only way that I thought was realistic to do that.
Okay, thank you. And for Karolien, you explained about a chat box. You made it one for users when there are no operators around. Do you also think it's possible to have it in the same chat box, the option for operators maybe to have a bit more in-depth or troubleshooting questions, but without users having these access as well? Or do you have to make two separate chat boxes for that?
I mean, you could potentially add it all in one chatbot, but I think you would probably want to put that separate. And you know, the chatbot works best with very specific sets of questions. And in my mind, if you're going to mix it, it might. Well, actually, maybe that's not true. I think as long as you structure all the Q&As into specific folders where it can search for it, instead of mixing it in with everything else, it could work. But I think you could go either way. It depends probably where you want to put it. Like an iLab chatbot might be more on your iLab web page, you know, where you have all your SOPs maybe and your information sharing, versus if you have something around instrumentation, you might want to post it more somewhere else. So I think you could go either way. Okay. But you can build two.
Hi, Chad Haney from Northwestern University. I just wanted to mention that we've used Power Automate for maintenance. One of our instruments has to have liquid nitrogen filled every 14 days. 10 days is like the limit, and then you get a nasty warning when it gets past 10 because 14 is the absolute limit. But anyway, we found it was easier to use the logic from Power Automate to put reminders in our shared calendar. Using anything else, you don't get that granularity of you want a 10-day deadline from the last time you did it, and then you want another 4 days to tell you, no, you really have to do it now. And it, you know, of course, it takes account of the weekends and things like that. So anyway, I just putting that out there that you can use it for maintenance, and it works really well if you've got SharePoint and Office 365, it's all there.
Great.
Well, thank you for all the comments and questions. You know, this is a big change from last year where many people did not know what this is. So if that WhatsApp group or any other forum that we can create, we can continue this conversation and kind of crowdsource this.
A workshop? Mm-hmm.
That'd be great, yep.
Yeah, and I'm sorry my QR code
that.
doesn't work, but I will fix
It's not
that.
working?
Well, I guess it didn't work. Oh, I'm so sorry. Just email me. Or join the WhatsApp group and then tell us. I'm sorry, I'll fix it.
Yeah, or you can join the WhatsApp group and. What? Put our presentation back.
The clicker.
Okay, it's
Yeah.
Let me see if I can fix it.
Is this the only way? That's a lot of click. No, it's just, I think you need to get out of this thing. How did you shift it?
They did.
Okay. Can you go to the first
Presentation?
PowerPoint, please? The first set?
The first presentation.
The first presentation.
that must be the first version.
Oh, I think that's the wrong version. There was an updated version uploaded.
You can also come find us. Might be easier.
All right, well,
I'll try to fix it.
I guess, can I connect mine? No, right? There's no way to connect
I don't think
anything?
there is.
Anyways.
I'll fix it tonight.
Cool.
Classic.
Oh.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Thank you.
thanks
Thank you.
everyone. Please try to email us, one of us, if you can find, you can find our name, and we'll plan.